Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to the Conquering Your Clownfish podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest today, Reuben Mitchell. Reuben is coming to us from Oklahoma, where he resides with his wife and 3 boys. Reuben is an entrepreneur, founder of Kingdom Now Ministries, which feeds over 4,000 families a year, and an incredible Down syndrome advocate. Their youngest son, Bastian, also known as Bam Bam, was born with Down syndrome and started out his life with stomach surgery, followed by heart surgery. Bam Bam opened up a new world to the Mitchells, and they have continued to be unstoppable advocates and love seeing the joy that Bam Bam brings to others. Reuben, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Yes, so this is a special treat. I think we're probably pretty close to 30 episodes that we've produced just this year on Conquering Your Clownfish. And we've had very, very few dads on. I think 2, maybe 3 max. And so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were just kind of talking about that. It's, dads don't really talk a lot about their feelings and things like that. So it's probably a little difficult to get them to come on and talk about how they felt about all this and, go through that whole journey in their life.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, I agree. My oldest son that has Down syndrome is 17, and it was a number of years, multiple years that I could not talk about that without really just having an overwhelming feeling of just emotion and all the rawness that comes with that. And so I get it. Yeah, I get it. But I commend you for your willingness to share. You're jumping in with both feet right now.
Yeah, it's tough when you're the husband, the father, and your wife's going through the same thing as you are, right? But you want to be strong for her and, not break down while she's breaking down.
Yeah.
I can think of many days of being at work all day and then coming home and literally just sitting in my driveway and just crying.
Wow.
Right. But I can't do that in front of my kids, in front of my wife, because I know that she's struggling just as much as I am.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd sit there and cry and then, give myself a little bit, get myself in order, and then head in, to the house. But something that I found that helped me out a ton was a group called DOSA. And it's Dads on Special Assignment, and it's basically just a bunch of dads that have special needs children. And really all we do is just get around and just talk, right? And be vulnerable at that time, right? Talk about what's going on. And then, sitting in a room full of men that actually understand, what you're going through, helped me out a ton. It took me a while to find it. I think Bam was already 1 by the time I joined this group, but it helped out tremendously.
Wow. So I want to jump into the name, Bam Bam. Where did that come from? Because that is fantastic.
Yeah, so when my wife and I found out we were having our 3rd boy, before we even picked out a name, I said I wanted his nickname to be Bam Bam. So my wife was like, well, why don't we now name him Bastian and it'll be Bam Bam Bash, right? I was like, oh, that's great. And then, we didn't have a middle name picked out, and I was sitting with my mom and she was talking about, some of my great grandparents, and she said the name Augustus. I was like, I really like that name. It's a very strong name. So his full name is Bastian Augustus Mitchell, which the initials are BAM, Bam.
Perfect.
So it just kind of all worked together. But I knew I always liked that nickname, Bam Bam. So, and it fits well with him.
Yeah. Reuben, I'd like to go back to and explore with you, if you're open to it, just the diagnosis when you found out that you were having a son that has Down syndrome. Could you share about that experience?
Yeah. So, man, it was right. It was in 2020, December of 2020, I think. She was 31 weeks, but we still could not both be in the doctor's office.
Right.
Right, which to this day makes me so frustrated because my wife got told the news, by herself. I was in the parking lot. I couldn't be in there. So she had to get that news by herself, which is really tough. And then, they FaceTime me while I was, 100 yards away for them to tell us that, he most likely had Down syndrome. He was right on that scale where it wasn't 100%, but they thought, most likely he did. But then he had stomach issues, which I guess 50% of children with Down syndrome have this particular stomach issue. And then like 25% of Down syndrome have this particular, heart issue. So it was like, X plus X plus X equals, this. So, but they would never tell us for certain, which I wish they would have, because you still held out hope that it wasn't the case, even though you knew it was. I wish they would have been very upfront and just said it that way. You're not, just sitting and waiting and things like that.
Yeah.
But she was 21 weeks. And, on top of getting the news, right, it's tough, but also having the conversations with your family, extremely tough. But one of the best things my father had ever said to me was the day I told him, right, I told him his grandson was going to have Down syndrome. It was a very tough conversation. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "You're so lucky." And it broke me down, because I had this conversation with my brothers and, my wife's parents, and, you get a lot of, "I'm sorry," just a lot of condolences and things like that. First thing out of my dad's mouth was, "You're so lucky." And now that we're, 3 years past it, he was spot on with it.
Yeah.
We are so lucky. We are absolutely so lucky to have Bam Bam. He is such a joy.
What was your dad's point of reference there?
No point of reference. Dad's a very spiritual man. He lives by the Father. And in that moment, I think that was a word from the Father, not my father. Yeah. So, and he'll tell you that if you ask him. He said, "I don't know why I said it, but the Holy Spirit just came over him, and that's what came out of his mouth, and that was exactly what I needed to hear at that time."
Yeah, most definitely. And so that was at 21 weeks, right, when you received that?
31.
31 weeks? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So 31 weeks, you're pretty darn close to being able to bring Bam into this world and meet him in person. And so talk to me about that time period. So you're what, 8 weeks or so, 9 weeks before, from diagnosis until you actually meet him. Tell me about that time period for you and your family.
Yeah, so I think Bam arrived a couple weeks early, right? So it was about 6 or 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. I mean, that time period is very, very difficult, right? You're sorting through a lot of things mentally, spiritually, trying to come to grips with your son having disabilities and things of that, and you also don't know exactly what is going to take place, right? You don't know what type of care is going to take place. You're just in a weird spot mentally and emotionally. Luckily I've got a phenomenal wife that, these things can a lot of times bring marriages or separate marriages more than bring them together. Yeah. During that time, I, got closer to my wife than far apart, because we relied on each other during that time to make it through. It's just, your world just kind of explodes at that point. It's almost like you just don't know what to do, how to handle yourself. You're angry, you're frustrated, but you're still having a son, you're still having a child. So it was a very hard, 6 weeks there to mentally get through it. And you can't fully prepare yourself, right? Because you don't know exactly what it looks like. And we had two small children too at that point, right? So it was, you got to have those, conversations with them. And it was just, I relied on the Father more than ever during that time. Yeah, I was frustrated. I was mad. We had, we got down into the dirt together.
Sure.
Right. But my relationship with the Father grew. It didn't shrink during that time. It grew. Our relationship grew, and I relied heavily on Him to get me through that period of time of uncertainty, not knowing, exactly what was going to take place.
Reuben, share with me what it was like the day that Bam was born.
Oh, it was, again, an emotional roller coaster. And again, this goes back to my point of I wish they would have told me.
Sure.
There's 100% chance.
Sure.
Right? Because you're still, thinking maybe there's a chance that he's going to be okay, which he is great. But the feeling of having a child, right, is the greatest feeling in the world. And I wish I would have already dealt with the fact that I was going to have a son with Down syndrome. I hadn't fully dealt with it at that point because I was still holding out.
You had that hope still. You had
the hope that maybe this isn't what the physicians are telling us.
Yeah.
I think it was very hard on my wife, right? Because as soon as Bam was born, he went straight into surgery. Right? So my wife, and then from surgery, he went straight to the NICU.
Yep.
Right? So my wife didn't get to hold, her son for a couple of days.
Wow.
So it was extremely hard on her too. And, again, there's so many other medical stuff that's going on that they're still trying to figure out.
Yep.
Right? The feeding, like all these different things. And we're getting, we're not physicians. And at this time, the COVID thing is still going on. Yep. Right? So no family can come. It's just me and her. We're not doctors, right? Luckily I have a brother that's a physician that I could bounce things off of him and ask him what they mean by this, right? So again, just a lot of emotions, a lot of uncertainty. Yep. You don't even get to hold your son. Goes directly into surgery. It was just kind of a world. You don't really catch your breath, for a month or so. It felt like it was just, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is surgery, this is this, and you're just, and again, you're isolated. Your family can't see them. It's only me and my wife. Yep. So I was really frustrated with the whole circumstance. Sure. With the COVID thing, but again, it's hard watching, your son struggle, and he's in the NICU, and sure. All your wife wants to do is just hold her son, yeah. And it can't happen.
All the emotions that come with delivering a child, anyways. I mean, there's just a lot that's being put on there. So we're not too far removed from that time. I mean, Bam's only 3 now. He's going to be 4, yeah. In a ways out, but like we're 36 months plus removed from this moment, and so we'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings now.
He is the light of our world. I mean, he is so joyful, brings us so much joy. Like it's hard to express like how much joy he brings to our family, right? And those around him, and his brothers. His brothers are just so sweet to him. Protect him. It's all around just an amazing, amazing feeling to have him as part of our lives. So, right? I feel blessed and lucky to have Bam in our house and in our family.
I'd love to unpack that a little more, just from a father's perspective. You go from just a very emotional, like, obviously you loved your son, but you still held out hope in your heart when he was born that he would be born without Down syndrome, as would, I think, any parent that doesn't have the perspective maybe that you have right now. But in that moment, you were holding out hope. And an interesting thing that you said as well is that from your friends and your family, when they heard about this diagnosis, oftentimes outside of your father, it was condolences. It was, I'm sorry. And it was condolences in essence. And so now, I mean, we're talking in only 36 months, and it was probably shorter than that. It's been a complete transformation. What was it that transformed in your life? How did that paradigm completely shift in that short period of time?
Well, it's going to be a lot to unpack, because there's so many things that have taken place within, that first 12 months of life, right? So many things happened, right? He died in my arms twice. I gave him CPR twice, brought him back to life twice. He's been through open heart surgery. All of these things that, the constant medical issues, the constant, not knowing if he's going to make it through the night. Yeah. All of that drew my wife and I closer to the Father, right? And there was a moment, that kind of changed the dynamics between not just my marriage, but just my life in general with me and my wife. When we were in the hospital, it was before he had open heart surgery. Code blue starts going. Everything's blinking. He's essentially, dying right in front of our eyes. And my wife goes, "It's going to be okay." Just looked at me and goes, "It's going to be okay." And as soon as she said that, they're bagging him, trying to bring him back to life. As soon as she said that, everything, he came back to life. Everything was fine. And for her to say that in that moment, like, we're watching our son, potentially lose his life. I asked her, what happened, and she said, "I felt the Father tell me it was going to be okay."
Wow.
Like, everything's going to be okay. And that was the moment that everything changed, that we realized that everything is going to be okay. Yeah. Like, he's in the Father's hands. And from that moment on, everything has been way more, I don't know how to explain it, just peaceful. Like, the Father's going to take care of us. Father's going to take care of him. And the moment that you could see that he knew who I was, who his mom was, and could interact, you could just feel. I posted a video on Instagram a couple weeks ago of him as like I want to say he was like 10 months old, and you can just see the pure joy, right? The unfiltered joy that he has just being in our presence. Yeah. Right? It's so hard to explain how, you love every second of it. It's just an amazing thing to experience and to have in your life. And yeah, the medical stuff, it's not a lot of fun, but the joy that he brings just outweighs all of that stuff. Right? And once we got past the constant trips to the hospital, and we had the personal cell phone number of all of our doctors that we could call, and he's been out of the hospital has not gone back to the hospital in about a year and a half.
Wow.
Right. So we're about a year and a half of no hospital trips. And, he's in good health. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Now we can just enjoy, him the way he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I was actually unaware of those particular details of your story, and I can only imagine what that must have been like. And I just commend you for your faith in an all-knowing, all-loving Father that has a plan for each one of his children, and that, and that has created that solace and that peace. I'd love to visit now. We started early in the conversation briefly talking about dads on this disability journey, and how even before the podcast we were visiting and saying there's not a lot of dads out there that will share, whether that's through social media or just share in general about their feelings, their thoughts, and just their journey on the disability community, or in the disability community. I'd love to hear just your perspective on why you have chosen to be an advocate in sharing and being open and, quite frankly, being vulnerable about your experience.
Well, I don't know if I chose it or it chose me, right? I've been an open book my entire life. I don't mind, and that stems from my father. If you'll ever meet my father, he is an open book to everything, his feelings, all of that stuff. But I think it's important for men going through something like this to be a little vulnerable, right? To show their true emotions during that time, because again, I know I'm being a little light on exactly what it's like, because it is extremely difficult.
Yeah,
it's extremely difficult, not just in a marriage but just mentally, having a child with special needs, and then being the strong one of the marriage, or trying to be. Yep. That doesn't give a lot of room for you to deal with those emotions. Yeah. Right? Because it's not just you going through this. Like, your wife's also going through it. She carried him, and there's a lot of things going on there, that you have to work through, and there's not a lot of time for us to show our emotional side of things. That's why DOSA was so important to me, because that gave me that time to truly, vent and speak my mind, and tell them my worries, my frustrations, and when you're married, you're supposed to be the one. She's supposed to vent to you, and you're supposed to say it's okay.
That's right.
Right. So, like, where am I supposed to say I'm worried? And it gave me that outlet. Yeah. But men are built differently to handle these types of things differently. We bury a lot of it. But you can also find yourself very angry, not just at others. I'll tell you, something that I didn't realize I was doing, when I would kind of show my emotion, and people would say, oh, I understand, everything, and then you'd go, no, you don't. Yeah. Like, I know, like, and I was I was so frustrated about everything. I was getting frustrated at that person.
Sure.
Right. Saying, I understand, because it's like, no, you don't.
Right.
But I know that they're just trying to help.
Yep.
Right. So I needed a place for somebody to say, I know what you're going through, and then they actually know what they're going through. But I didn't realize that, like, how wrong that was of me to get frustrated with that person, because I know they just had the good intentions there. But I think it's important for fathers that have special needs kids, or fixing to have special needs kids, to go to something like that, or reach out to to somebody who has a special needs son or daughter, to be able to have that conversation, that place to vent, that place to show true emotion, and things like that. Because if you don't, I feel like you're just going to bury everything and get angry, and you have outbursts and things like that. And a lot of times people, fall away from the Father during this time because they're so mad.
Well,
and
that's where the divorce comes into play. That's where, individuals, when they don't have that outlet, a dad, for example, to be able to share really what's going on and have that support group, that's when they do turn away. That's when they do end up being divorced. That's when they look for alternate ways to be able to just cope with what they're experiencing. It's a real thing.
It's 100% a real thing. And you can get there pretty easily if you don't open up. You can go to a pretty dark place. I'll tell you something I did, which anybody that knows me knows I really don't read. I don't like writing, right? I'm not an artsy person whatsoever. Now, my wife, on the other hand, I think she reads like 80 books a year, right? Wow. She reads a ton. Her mom is actually an art major, right? Complete opposites, right? Like I was all sports, never even thought about art or reading a book, in general. But I actually started writing during this time, right after my son was born. I think I started a journal in February, and it actually helped, right? I got my thoughts onto paper, and I was able to, kind of work through some of those issues I was having. But, I would never do that like ever, but for some reason it was like I needed some sort of outlet there to get my thoughts down and rationalize and all that different stuff. So I actually started writing. I don't do it anymore. It was 3 or 4 months worth, but that actually helped out quite a bit, actually.
That's a great suggestion, great insight there. Yeah, really good insight. For me, I remember we found out Nash had Down syndrome after he was born, actually in the delivery room.
Wow.
That before we got to hold Nash or anything, they're kind of doing their thing and cleaning him up and checking him out or whatever. And the doctor came to me and kind of pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I think your son has Down syndrome." And that was, our introduction into that process. And so I needed to go and tell Andrea that. And so that was a very unique thing. But I remember specifically in the delivery room actually Googling on my phone Down syndrome. And I just had this overwhelming sense of like responsibility, an overwhelming desire to protect my son, to provide for my son. I've always been an ambitious person. I love business and I love growing businesses, but I just had like this fire inside of me of like, I have to work harder than I've ever worked in my entire life to make sure that he has everything that he ever needs and that he is protected. And it was just this overwhelming, like, and not like in a positive way. It was more of like this weight placed on my shoulders. And that was a very, very difficult thing to be able to just process. And then I remember after that going to lunch actually with my dad and my sister, and just a couple hours after Nash was born, and I was walking into the restaurant, and out walked a couple, retirement age couple, and right behind them was a girl probably in her 40s that had Down syndrome, and I lost it.
Yeah.
Because
oh yeah.
It was then that I realized, like, Nash doesn't like go to college or move out per se when he's 18, 19 years old. And I just like had, you have this perspective on what your life looks like in your retirement years and empty nesters and the things that you're going to do. And just all of that weight just coming down on you is just such a real thing. And, I relate so much to what you're saying is the last person I could go to and share this with was my wife. Mm-hmm. Who was feeling the exact same things, and in her own way. And so, yeah, I respect what you're saying, and I empathize with what you're saying. And for our listeners that are out there, whether it's a mom or a dad, and whether it's a Down syndrome diagnosis or whatever diagnosis it would be, I would just highly encourage you as a spouse, whether that's for yourself or your spouse to encourage your husband to get to a place where they can share openly, like what we're doing right now. And that doesn't have to be with their wife. Like, it's difficult oftentimes to be able to share that way with your spouse. And so I love what you're saying about this support group that you had shared. That would have been really nice to have.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about support groups like that, right?
Yeah.
That's and again, men don't talk about their feelings to other men without being in a group like that. So
Sure.
a lot of people don't know of groups. I know DOSA is only here in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They're spreading out across the nation, or that's their plan. It's actually was started by a good friend of mine who has a son with special needs. He's nonverbal, in a wheelchair, has seizures, and he also, I think he has 6 more boys now, and that was his first.
Wow.
That was his first. So, and he knew he got really big into building cars and stuff during that time because, again, we bury things, right? And we find other things to do rather than talk about it, right?
That's right.
And he just realized how much that would have helped him during his time. His son, I think, is 14 now, 14 or 15, so it was a while ago. But if it was around, he said it would have helped tremendously.
No doubt.
Right. But going back to what you were saying about seeing, the kid with Down syndrome. First off, that conversation with your wife had to have been just one of the toughest conversations you'll ever have.
It was gut wrenching.
I mean, I can't imagine having that, and then the weight of the way me and my wife actually had kids was we wanted all of our kids out of the house by the age of 50. So we actually planned our lives around having kids so they can be out of the house by the age of 50.
Yeah.
And now, that ain't gonna happen now. But there's so many other things that have to take into consideration. He's not gonna go to college, right? I'm sure there are kids with Down syndrome and special needs kids that go. Not saying it's not going to happen, but most likely
Different,
right?
It's a different college experience if they do go. For
Exactly. Sure. Most likely he's going to be in the house with you, and that's a hard thing to deal with, right? And then you talk about schooling and things of that. That's just and then one of the conversations I have with my sons all the time is like, you don't take life for granted, because there's some people just like your brother who don't have the opportunity.
That's right.
To get a degree, don't have the opportunity to do this and to do that. So
Right.
I think it's going to help my children understand that life, a healthy, 100% healthy life is a gift from the Father. Like, not everybody gets that chance.
Yeah. This is fun. This is actually really fun for me because, again, Nash is 17, but I remember like it was yesterday when he was 3. And I actually, I like you, I have wrote a lot. I journal a lot, and I just really try and process my thoughts and so forth the best that I can. But I remember me as a dad having a 3-year-old that has Down syndrome, and now being able to look back at that here 14 years later, and the words that come to my mind are the exact same words that your father told you, in that if you think you got it good right now, just wait. You have no idea how lucky you are to have Bam Bam in your life. And it only gets better from here, brother. And it's pretty dang amazing to see and watch these boys grow up. And what you'll find is that he is going to teach you things that you never could have been taught by anybody else except for him. And you're going to have experiences with him, and your family's going to have experiences with him that can only be described as sacred. And it's a pretty special journey that you have ahead of you. So you have that going for you.
Yeah, I cannot wait. I cannot. It seems like every day he's becoming, more and more aware.
Yep.
Right. So Bam doesn't talk a lot, right? He says a couple words, and but he has a little bit more hand-eye coordination than some of the kids in his school. He goes to a school called Little Lighthouse. I don't know if you've ever heard of Little Lighthouse. So it's a special needs school for children ages, I think 1 to 7. It's completely free. Completely wow. Free. They have nurses in the room with them. They have speech therapy, physical therapy, all for free for anybody that has a special needs kid. I mean, it's the most amazing thing.
That's amazing.
I've ever been a part of. It truly is. It's so blessed to have that in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is just, if you get a chance, look it up, Little Lighthouse.
I will.
It's absolutely amazing. But there's a lot of kids with Down syndrome there. And, some are way more talkative, right, than Bam. And then some are a little bit less hand-eye coordination. And again, this goes back to you just, you don't know. I don't know what the next, 10 years of his life looks like, because we do not know if he's going to keep developing or if he, is just going to stop mentally right here. Like you just don't know. But I can see that he's starting to develop a little bit quicker now that he's 3 with his speech and things, because he spent 10 years of his life in a hospital, right? Not really having too much interaction with people. So I think his speech ability was hindered a little bit there.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we just don't know what it looks like. But you know what? I'm happy with whatever. I mean, the kid is awesome.
Well, it goes back to like what your wife said. It is going to work out. It's going to work out exactly how it's supposed to. And it's just pretty awesome that we get to be part of this ride. There's the hashtag that is kind of the thing with Down syndrome, what is the lucky few, and we truly are blessed to be part of this community. I'm super thankful, Reuben, that we were able to connect and be able to have you on the podcast today. This is such a fun conversation. I'm excited to watch Bam grow and develop and ultimately sing that song that he's meant to sing. But appreciate your time today. And it's been awesome to have you on the show.
I appreciate you having the conversation with me, and I appreciate what you're doing. This can be very, very hard on a lot of families, and to have something like this where they can listen to people who have been through it and show that there is joy, there's light at the end of the tunnel, is something special. So I commend you for doing this, and I hope people can listen to this and get a little bit more joy out of their day.
Most definitely. Thanks, my friend. Thanks again for being a guest.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.